Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to another League of Legends guide. Today we are covering top lane Trundle.
Time to troll!
Trundle is a tank killer mainly because he can steal a target's tanky stats and give them to himself. He then has great movement speed from his W and has built-in sustain from his passive. He has great debuffs and makes a really good split pusher since we get a Titanic Hydra in our build. Of course, there's also the fact that in the mid and late game, he can 1v1 most champions. Now Trundle does however lack a hard CC, and sure he does have a pop-up from his Pillar of Ice which also does slow, but he doesn't have anything like a stun. This pillar can then also screw up a fight. If you are a new Trundle and you don't really know how to use it properly, you may end up saving the enemy by giving them an escape route. Trundle can then also be kited. Sure, he does get a lot of movement speed from his W, but when this is in cooldown, he obviously doesn't gain any bonus movement speed, and he doesn't actually have a gap closer. All in all, he is a fantastic champion, and he's a great pick against those very tanky top laners. For my Masteries, I go 12 Ferocity and 18 Resolve, grabbing Grasp of the Undying as my Keystone Mastery. Trundle does already have some nice sustain in the lane from his passive, but when you do add Grasp of the Undying, it's going to be insanely hard to push him out of lane. It's great in prolonged fights, and with the rest of the Masteries we grab, we do get even tankier. 12 Ferocity and 18 Resolve is definitely the best Masteries for Trundle, and I wouldn't really recommend anything else. For your runes, you'll want to go attack damage reds, armor yellows, magic resist blues, and attack damage quints. Now attack speed quints are a great option as well, but I do prefer having attack damage myself just to make my Chomp hit a little bit harder in trades. Since Chomp does reset your auto attack timer, you can do an auto attack, Q auto attack for a very quick combo, and with all that extra attack damage, it will deal a lot of damage. If you were against a top laner who does only physical damage, then you could opt for scaling magic resist instead for the later game. For my first summoner spell, I like to take Flash. Trundle doesn't have a built-in escape or gap closer, so it can save you in a lot of different situations. Now you could also go for Ghost because it is a good alternative to Flash, and if you are looking to add some ability in those team fights, it will be rather strong, but I'm personally a bigger fan of Flash. Then for the second summoner spell, I almost always go for Teleport. Teleport will allow you to split push for large portions of the game and put a lot of pressure on the enemy team. You're then also going to be able to make it to teamfights and objectives whenever they do happen. Now, like always in solo queue, you could opt for Ignite instead. You won't be as strong of a split pusher, but it will add some nice kill pressure in that top lane, and it can get you snowballing. But now, let's cover those abilities, starting with your passive, King's Tribute. So, whenever an enemy dies near Trundle, he heals for between 2 and 6% of their maximum health, and this has a 1400 range. So this is a fantastic ability because when you are near the minion wave and minions are dying, as they will be because you're supposed to be last hitting, you will heal for a part of their health, and that gives some phenomenal sustain. There's not too much else you could say about the ability, it's just a great way to get some extra health during the lane phase. Now let's look at that Q ability, Chomp. So when you use the ability, Trundle's next basic attack deals additional physical damage and slows his target by 75% for 0.1 seconds. After biting his target, Trundle gains bonus attack damage for 8 seconds and reduces his target's attack damage by half the amount for the same duration. As previously mentioned, this does reset your auto attack timer, so you can do an auto attack Q auto attack for a very quick combo. This is pretty much the combo you're going to try to do throughout the lane phase. You're going to be last hitting with your normal auto attacks, and when you can, try to chomp the enemy as much as you can to put out some nice damage and reduce their attack damage at the same time. Next up is our W, Frozen Domain. Trundle coats the target area in ice for 8 seconds, and when he's inside he gains bonus attack speed, movement speed, and 20% increased health restoration from all sources. So this ability is of course great because when you are in those long duels, you will get better healing and faster auto attacks, meaning you're going to trade more effectively. Since this does also give movement speed, it's great in teamfights for moving throughout and getting to the back line, but also can be used for escaping, as of course you can use it to run away with extra movement speed. That's pretty much how you use the ability. Whenever there is a prolonged trade or a team fight, you want to drop it so you do stay inside and get bonuses. Now your last basic ability, your E, Pillar of Ice. So Trundle projects a Pillar of Ice at the target location for 6 seconds, knocking back everyone directly cast over it on cast, acting as impassable terrain for the duration, and slowing enemies around it. So this ability here can be used either to engage or disengage. You can drop these behind the enemy when they are trying to escape, so they either have to walk around it with that slow, or, of course, flash over it. This is also a fantastic ability in teamfights because you can split up the enemy team and have like a 5-on-3 with 2 waiting outside, out of range to even attack. It's a great ability, and it is nice that we only have to get 1 point into this early on because all we really need is that chunk of ice. Don't forget, when your team is running away, make sure you drop Pillar behind yourself so they can't actually chase you. But now we land at our ultimate, Subjugate. Trundle drains the life force out of the target enemy champion, dealing magic damage, healing for the pre-mitigation damage dealt, and stealing 40% of their armor and magic resistance. Half of the total damage and stealing is applied instantly, and the other half is applied over the next 4 seconds. So this ultimate is fantastic, and it's why he's known as a tank killer. Sure, the enemy top laner can build up all this magic resistance and armor, but you're gonna steal 40% of it and become unkillable yourself. In a team fight, you pretty much just want to make sure you're using this on the enemy tank so they can actually be killed, and you're gonna be able to go through the team fight and survive. For our skill order, we first take a point in our ultimate whenever we can, at 6, 11, and 16. Then we want to focus on maxing our Q Chomp first, as it is excellent for trading and actually reduces the enemy's damage as well. Then you're going to focus on maxing your W, as you do get bonus attack speed, movement speed, and increased health restoration from all sources. And then finally, you're going to max your Pillar. We only really need the 1 early point in it, so we do actually get the pop-up, and we can stop the enemy from escaping. Now, whether you get your Pillar at 2 or 3 is up to you. I generally take it at level 3, unless I know my jungler is coming up for a really early gank, in which case I'll take the Pillar at level 2. For our first combo, I have the trading combo that I've already mentioned a few times. Simply, we auto-attack the enemy, then hit them with our Chomp, and then auto-attack again. Since Chomp does reset your auto-attack timer, this is a really quick combo to get off 3 attacks and deal a bunch of damage. Now, for our surprise all-in, first we block off the enemy with our Pillar of Ice. We then drop the Frozen Domain on the ground since we can move up to them quicker with the movement speed, and we will get some attack speed when we get to them. You'll then want to cast your Subjugate on the enemy to steal their stats, and then you'll want to follow up by auto-attacking, using your Chomp, and then auto-attacking again. In the early lane phase, focus on last hitting and harass the enemy as much as you can with your Chomp and your auto-attacks. In long drawn-out trades, make sure you drop your Frozen Domain to increase your damage potential and increase the sustain. When you are going for a kill finally, you'll be able to keep them in the area with your Pillar of Ice. Try your best to either kill or push the enemy champion out of lane. If you do so, make sure you shove the minion wave under their tower so they miss a lot of XP and gold. If you can, also focus on getting down their tower as soon as you can. First tower kill bonus gold is really nice and can give your team a really nice advantage. In the mid game, you'll want to be split pushing when you have your teleport available, and as soon as you're needed for a teamfight or objective, make sure you show up with that teleport. If, however, you're not needed, you can sit in top lane and try to take down some other towers. In a team fight, you want to try to cut their team in half with your Pillar of Ice so some of the champions can't even get to the team fight. You also want to make sure that you use your Subjugate on a tanky champion to steal a high amount of their tankiness so you can become very hard to bring down and their tank becomes a lot squishier. And then in the late game, it's going to be pretty damn similar to your mid game. You'll want to sit in a side lane and split push whenever you can, and your teleport's off cooldown. I've honestly had many games on Trundle where I could just sit in side lanes and win the game by myself while the rest of my team distracted the enemy and stopped them from recalling. Now, when you do however get in those team fights, you do have the same goals. Disrupt the enemies as much as you can with your Pillar of Ice, and steal those tanky stats from a tanky enemy with your Subjugate. At this point, you'll either want to try helping peel for your carries, or get onto the enemy backline and deal as much damage as you can, while you also soak their damage. But now, let's look at a couple of our hard matchups. So coming in at number 1 is Pantheon, and he's annoying because his spears will do a ton of damage to you in that early game. Your goal is just to survive in lane as much as you can, and if he does go missing, make sure you ping so he doesn't drop in your teammate's head. As long as you can make it through the lane phase and he doesn't get fed, you're going to outscale the absolute shit out of him in that later game, so just survive. Next is Teemo, and man, he's just so cancer for melee top laners that do rely on auto attacks. The best you can do when playing against Teemo is to pick up as much farm as you can and play very passively. Just like against Pantheon, you're going to outscale him so friggin' hard and you offer a lot more in team fights, so you just have to wait for your time to shine. So third here is Jax, and he can be very hard for you if he is getting his Counter-Strike stun on you. He will, however, usually try to combo this with his Leap Strike, but you can interrupt it if you do land a good Pillar of Ice between where he is jumping and you. When his stun is down, you can then start to fight him, but don't get in too long of trades because when his passive does get stacked, he will deal a lot of damage. Now these are just 3 of the hard matchups. There of course are a lot more, but generally you are a very strong pick against tanky champions since you can take away their tankiness. And anything else that does have really strong trades but doesn't build too tanky can generally be pretty hard for Trundle. But now let's finish this off with our item build, and usually we want to start with a Corrupting Potion and a Warding Totem. If we are in a really hard matchup and we need even more sustain, we could get the Doran's Shield, but generally I like to get the Corrupting Potion almost always. Now for our core build, we get the Titanic Hydra, Dead Man's Plate, and a Spirit Visage. In a really easy matchup, you could get the Ravenous Hydra instead of the Titanic Hydra. Of course, you can always switch them back and forth, but generally I like to get the Titanic Hydra, as I do prefer having that base health from the item. For our boot options, we have Ninja Tabis against a high AD team, Merc Treads against high AP/CC, and if we want full-on mobility, we have the Boots of Swiftness. For our defensive item pool, we of course have all of those usual armor items like the Randuin's, Thornmail, and Frozen Heart. Randuin's is just a great general tanky item as it does give health as well. Thornmail is great if we are against a really high AD team, and Frozen Heart is great if we do need to reduce some attack speed at the same time. Guardian Angel, like always, is a great item for that ultra late game since we can come back to life, but it also does give some armor and magic resist, making it a really nice tanky item. If we want to add some split push, we could get the Zizi-Rot Portal, and if we do need some magic resist, we could either get a Banshee's Veil or a Maw. Now if we do prefer getting some offensive items, we could get the Trinity Force or Iceborne Gauntlet, as we do have a 4-second ability on our Q, and make excellent use of the Sheen part of these items. Black Cleaver is another great way to pick up 20% CDR and take off some armor. Then of course you have Blade of the Ruined King, which is another great item against very tanky teams. Frozen Mallet is a pretty solid item as well. It does increase our tankiness, but also gives us some nice offensive damage as well, and we can stick to targets a hell of a lot easier. If you wanted to pick some more attack speed and magic resist in one, the Wit's End is a great item as well, and the Sterax Gauge is great to get some attack damage as well, yet have that shield as a defensive. So for our tanky full build, we take that core, get those Merc Treads, and then a Randuin's and a Thornmail. We're not going to deal a ton of damage with this build, but we'll still be a pretty solid split pusher since we will have the Titanic Hydra, and we will be insanely hard to bring down. Now if we were either snowballing or had a really tanky support and jungler, we could go for the carry build. We of course still take our full build, but before we do get the Dead Man's Plate, we have the Trinity Force to really increase our damage. At the end, Blade of the Ruined King is a great way to pick up a bunch of damage, add some nice attack speed, and get a bunch of health back in fights. He's a champion who itemizes very well. I'm sure you can notice that from his very vast item pool, so pretty much just pick up whatever you need for the situation you're in. So that covers everything for our top lane Trundle guide. If you guys did enjoy the guide, you could thumb it up, and if you are new here, you could always subscribe. Or you could follow me on Twitter at egaming_TV, which is where I do skin giveaways at the end of every month. I'm also working on co-hosting a podcast, so the link to apply will also be in the video description. But thank you guys a lot for watching the video, and I will see you guys in the next champion guide. Peace!
Oh, I'm killing inside, you still in my mind. Distractions are killing my vibe, and not the magazine. My agony is riddled in lines, I'm riddled in lines. And nines bust like 10 at a time, but he's from cop hands. Heads popping open like pop cans. Televised to entertain, to thank us all for watching. We click, shared, and clock in, just to chase a dollar or a dream. There's no in-between option.